this, didn't you? You staged this one. You staged it. You child abuser. You child abuser. Where's Jimmy Savile? Where's Jimmy Savile? Get back! Traitor! You child abuser!
Paedophile protected!
You paedophile!
Keir Starmer walked onto the stage expecting the traditional applause. Instead, he was met with something no politician seeks: open hostility, boos, jeers, and a wave of anger from a crowd that had quite clearly turned. Against him, this was not the scattered protest of a few dissenting voices. It was widespread, raw frustration, loud, visible, and impossible to ignore. Starmer attempted to continue, pressing on as if the disruption were a minor distraction, but the noise only escalated. The expressions in the audience told their own story: disillusionment, anger, even outright contempt. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others shouted over him, drowning out his words. Any expectation of a warm reception evaporated. What unfolded was not a momentary setback, but a striking public humiliation, a sharp reminder of just how fragile political authority can be when trust breaks down.
Shame! 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 Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now!
What went so wrong? And why did many of his own supporters turn on him with such intensity? Let's break it down. As leader of the Labour Party, Keir Starmer likely believed he was stepping into familiar territory, an audience broadly sympathetic, perhaps even receptive to his message, a room that, at the very least, would grant him a hearing and perhaps the customary applause. But from the outset, the atmosphere told a different story. The energy was flat, almost hostile. No smiles, no warmth, just folded arms, guarded stares, and a low rumble of discontent. Even before Starmer spoke a word, the mood was unmistakable. This was not going to be the reception he had counted on.
Every stage during this crisis, my approach has been driven by the need to respond to both these tragedies, to stand by the right to self-defense of any nation which suffers terrorism on this scale, alongside the basic human rights of innocent Palestinians caught once again in the crossfire.
As Starmer began his speech, he turned first to the economy, falling back on well-worn language about fiscal responsibility and Labour's plan for growth. But instead of nods of agreement, the audience gave him nothing. Blank stares, folded arms. Undeterred, he pressed on, moving to Brexit, tempting the near-impossible task of straddling both sides of the divide, appealing to pro-Brexit and pro-Remain voters alike. It rang hollow. Whispers spread across the room. Eyes rolled. Murmurs grew. Then came the breaking point, his stance on the Israel-Gaza conflict. Starmer rejected calls for a ceasefire, insisting it was not the right step. That was the trigger. The first boo cut sharply through the hall, loud, direct, impossible to ignore. Starmer faltered, visibly shaken. Before he could recover, another voice joined in, then another, and suddenly it wasn't isolated. Descent it was a tide of discontent. From that moment, the room shifted decisively. What had been quiet skepticism hardened into open hostility. The atmosphere grew tense, charged, and volatile. Whispers became open heckling. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others leaned across seats, voicing their anger more freely. The frustration that had simmered beneath the surface was now fully unleashed. Starmer attempted to push through, raising his voice to project confidence. But the more he spoke, the louder the interruptions became. Questions were shouted, challenges thrown at him. One woman stood up and demanded, "What about the children's care?" Others quickly echoed her anger, amplifying the backlash. For a moment, he hesitated, an unguarded pause that revealed the pressure he was under. He tried to regain control, but the momentum had already turned. By then, it was no longer a speech, it was a confrontation.
True democracy is citizen-led. Politics needs an update. We demand a people's house. We demand a people's house. We are in crisis. We are in crisis. Our whole future is in jeopardy.
Behind Starmer, the Labour MPs looked visibly uneasy. One buried his face in a notepad, feigning focus, while another clutched her phone, absorbed in its screen, anything to distract from the scene unfolding. Even his closest allies seemed to wish they could vanish. Then came the final blow. People began to leave. Entire rows stood, walking out in full view. Some slipped away quietly, muttering under their breath. Others made their departure pointed, delivering one last boo as they exited. By that stage it was clear, Starmer had lost the room. There would be no recovery. This was not simply a poorly received speech, it was another in a series of political missteps that have left his leadership under severe strain. For months, Labour supporters have grown restless, doubting his direction, and here their fears were confirmed. Keir Starmer is out of touch with the very people he seeks to lead. Nowhere is this clearer than on Brexit. In 2016, Starmer was a firm supporter of Remain, pushing for a second referendum. Today, he insists it is time to move on, hoping the public will consign the issue to the past, but the public has not moved on. Pro-Brexit Labour voters feel abandoned, while pro-Remain supporters feel betrayed. In the process, he has managed to alienate both sides of a political balancing act that has collapsed under its own contradictions.
If he thinks that bothers me, he doesn't know me. Protest or power, that's why we changed our party conference. That's why we changed our party. Thank you.
Starmer's economic platform is built on broad pledges of stability and fiscal responsibility, language that, to many, sounds more in tune with conservative orthodoxy than Labour tradition. On foreign policy, his refusal to support a ceasefire in Gaza has provoked deep unease within his own ranks. For many longtime Labour supporters, a party once seen as a standard-bearer for justice now appears led by a man more focused on political caution than moral conviction. Behind the scenes, that discontent is hardening. Party insiders admit there are whispers of a leadership challenge. Some MPs, frustrated and unconvinced, are quietly weighing their options. Starmer was meant to be Labour's steady hand, the leader who could restore credibility and guide the party back to power. Yet the reality looks far less certain. Polling shows Labour's approval sliding, and the Southport debacle has only compounded the doubts. If Starmer cannot reverse this decline quickly, the question may no longer be whether he can lead Labour into government, but whether he can hold on to the leadership at all.
The first is on the question of terrorism and what constitutes terrorism. And my concern in this case is that we have clearly got an example of extreme violence, individualised violence, that we have to protect our children from and our citizens from. And it is a new threat. It's not what we would have usually thought of as terrorism when definitions were drawn up, when guidelines were put in place, when the framework was put in place. And we have to recognise that here today, because I think most people would say, looking at the facts of this case, it's clearly extreme violence, it's clearly intended to terrorise. And I completely accept and understand that, and that is my view. Therefore, we have to make sure that the law and the framework for responding is appropriate to the new threat that we face. And there we will make whatever changes are necessary in the law.
If the fallout from Southport wasn't damaging enough, Keir Starmer's latest move has left many Labour supporters bewildered. For years, Labour positioned itself as a firm opponent of Donald Trump, condemning his policies, his rhetoric, and his impact on global politics. Starmer himself was outspoken in his criticism, framing Trump as a destabilizing force and a threat to democratic norms. Now, however, the tone has shifted. In a recent statement, Starmer praised elements of Trump's approach to international affairs, even suggesting Britain should seek closer cooperation with him. This is the same Donald Trump that Labour once denounced as a danger to democracy. So what has changed? That's the question now, echoing across the party. Some Labour MPs see this as nothing less than a betrayal of core values. Others, more cautious, have chosen their words carefully, but the discomfort is evident.
On the second point, yes, of course I was kept up to date with the facts as they were emerging. That is usual practice. But just like you, as a journalist, I had to observe the law of the land. It was not my personal decision to withhold this information, any more than it was a journalist's personal decision not to print or write about it. That is the law of the land that is in place for the reasons I've set out, to protect the integrity of the system, to ensure that the victims and their families get the justice that they deserve.
At the grassroots level, Labour members are not merely confused, they are angry. Social media is awash with comments from lifelong supporters who believe the party is abandoning its core values. If Keir Starmer's strategy is to court conservative voters by shifting his positions, it carries a significant risk. In reaching out to them, he may well drive away the very base that has sustained Labour for generations. The party now finds itself at a crossroads, wrestling with its identity. Is it still the progressive left-leaning movement that once championed social justice? Or, under Starmer, has it become a centrist machine willing to compromise principle for political calculation? At present, no one inside or outside the party seems certain. That lack of clarity could prove disastrous. Starmer stands at a pivotal moment. The question is whether he can recover ground or whether his approach has already set him on a path to failure. His allies may dismiss Southport as a one-off, the product of a difficult audience or just another passing skirmish in politics. But that would be wishful thinking. This was not ordinary heckling. It was a public rebuke from the very people he relies upon. And more than that, it is part of a pattern, a steady erosion of support that is becoming increasingly difficult to ignore.
I utterly condemn the far-right thuggery we've seen this weekend. Be in no doubt, those that have participated in this violence will face the full force of the law. The police will be making arrests, individuals will be held on remand, charges will follow, and convictions will follow. I guarantee you will regret taking part in this disorder, whether directly or those whipping up this action online and then running away themselves. This is not protest. It is organised, violent thuggery.
Keir Starmer wanted to unite the
Keir Starmer set out to unite Labour and broaden its appeal to voters. Instead, he now faces one of the most serious challenges of his leadership. The speech that was meant to project confidence has done the opposite, exposing deep divisions within the party and raising fresh doubts among supporters. Critics accuse him of betraying his earlier stance on Brexit, while his shifting positions on foreign policy have left many questioning whether his leadership can truly be trusted. The boos in Southport were not just about a single speech. They were a warning, signal of visible expression of discontent that cannot easily be dismissed. The central question now is stark. Can Starmer turn this around, or is this the beginning of the end for Labour under his leadership? Will he recalibrate his approach, or will the backlash continue to gather pace? One thing is certain, the pressure on Starmer is growing, and the weeks ahead will be decisive.